Welcome back to Geographics. I'm your host, Cosmic Horror Madman Eric Malachite, and today's script was provided by Larry Holsworth. So be sure to show him some love in the comments as you deploy your likes, subscribe and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about historical places. Let's get to it. In 1527, a Spanish expedition began a trek of discovery along the northwest Gulf Coast of Florida, intent upon establishing colonial settlements to expand Spain's growing empire in the New World. It is known today as the Narvaez expedition, named for its first leader, Panfilo de Narvaez. The expedition proved ill-fated. Of the approximately 600 men who began the exploration, only 4 survived. Yet during their many tribulations and disasters, which included hurricanes, hostile encounters with some native tribes, friendly encounters with others, hunger, and disease, they did add a new word to the English language. In June 1528, an arm of the expedition under the command of Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca reached a village of friendly natives near the site of present-day Tallahassee, Florida. In his memoirs of the expedition, de Vaca, who was one of the fortunate survivors, referred to the native tribe as the Appalachian. Interestingly, the region described by de Vaca as Appalachia, which was dominated by the newly discovered tribe, is no longer today considered part of the region that the word Appalachian describes. Florida is considered south of the cultural and geographic region called Appalachia. It is a region which consists of numerous subcultures which evolved over the ensuing centuries based on the backgrounds of the Europeans and Africans which eventually settled its lands. Today's Appalachia is a collection of such cultures, and though they share much in common, they also claim distinct differences in music, cuisine, dance, customs, and even dialects. For instance, take the name of the region as an example. In the southern regions, it is commonly pronounced Appalachia, while northern dialects refer to it as Appalachia. The region is vast, running from north to south from western New York State to upper Alabama. From the east, it ranges from roughly 75 miles west of Washington, D.C. to as far west as Cincinnati, Ohio in the north and northwestern Mississippi to the south. It has no clearly defined borders, neither geographically nor culturally, with definitions varying depending on the source consulted. In 1965, the United States Congress established the Appalachian Regional Commission, or ARC. The commission was tasked with achieving the goal of creating better opportunities within Appalachia in areas of education, employment, and economic parity. To achieve its goals, the commission defined Appalachia as including parts of 12 states: Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New York. The entire state of West Virginia is also included. The entire region is over 205,000 square miles and is home to more than 25 million people. If you've ever needed to leave the US, either for vacation or for other reasons, then you might be wondering what to do with your cell phone, because leaving your country can make it extremely difficult to find a signal with your regular cell phone provider, and it could result in expensive roaming charges. And that's why we've partnered with today's sponsor, Saley, because they offer this product called an eSIM card. What's an eSIM? Well, it's a digital version of the SIM cards that go into smartphones. But Saley's eSIMs are able to give you network coverage and data even while you're abroad visiting Canada for no real reason whatsoever. Best of all, once the eSIM is installed, there's no need to install a new eSIM for each country. And Saley's plans are extremely affordable, are available in over 190 countries, and you won't ever have to deal with roaming charges again. So what are you waiting for? Get an exclusive 15% discount on Saley data plans when you use code GEOGRAPHICS at checkout, and download the Saley app or go to saley.com/geographics. Throughout its history, the region has been settled by peoples of diverse backgrounds from diverse areas, and it retains such differences. It has long been the subject of stereotyping, much of it critical. It has been viewed disparagingly as being a region of poorly educated, backwards, isolated people. Stereotypes have been used in advertising and entertainment, such as for products such as Mountain Dew and Hillbilly Bread, television characters such as the Beverly Hillbillies, or the character Ernest P. Worrell, Ernest, created by the actor and comedian Jim Varney. Such stereotyping, while admittedly funny, is inaccurate, since Appalachia actually contains numerous subcultures, wildly different from each other. They also ignore the many contributions to American culture which came into the mainstream from the region. Here in the second part of our Appalachia series is a look at the cultures of the mountains which influence other cultures throughout America and across the world. The European settlements that grew up along the east coast of North America were by the 18th century largely huddled on the seaboard and inland along the rivers and streams to the foothills of the eastern mountains. There they faced several barriers to crossing the mountains to the rumored bountiful lands beyond. The mountains themselves were one such barrier, with no roads other than Native American trails. Many of the native tribes opposed the encroachment of Europeans into what they viewed, rightfully so, as their lands. In the mid-18th century, the British government made it illegal to settle west of the mountains, in part to appease those native tribes and in part to ensure control of the economies of the various colonies. The end of the French and Indian War in 1763 changed that position, at least to some extent. Great Britain obtained the title to lands in Appalachia as a result of that conflict, including in western Pennsylvania along the Great Lakes of Fort Detroit and in the lands west of the southern colonies, including Virginia and the Carolinas. Officially, settlement was prescribed by the Indian Proclamation Line of 1763, established by Parliament that year. Trading posts to establish commerce with the Native Americans and with British and colonial fur traders were allowed in the new territories. The colonists largely ignored the proclamation. The opportunity to speculate in Western lands and profit by them proved too great a temptation to ignore, with the British Crown preoccupied by the increasingly fractious colonists in Boston, Philadelphia, and Williamsburg. Settlers on the western fringes of the colonies began to edge into the prescribed lands. At first, the trespassing was largely by hunters seeking fur. They returned with descriptions of lands teeming with game, primeval forests, and beyond the mountain barrier, great expanses of arable land. In the western areas of Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia, colonists began to seek their fortune on the western side of the mountain barrier. They were largely Scots-Irish, only 1 or 2 generations from their roots in the old countries, and they headed west in whole families. They settled on the western slopes of the mountains, in hollows and valleys, in large family enclaves, establishing clannish regions as they had in the old country. They took with them their clan's customs, oral histories, superstitions, religious beliefs, holidays, and traditions. Further north, a similar migration occurred among the settlers of New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. These were descendants of displaced German and Dutch families, as well as English and French fugitives of the religious wars that had disrupted Europe for centuries. They too took with them their shared histories and customs. Quakers from Pennsylvania, Lutherans from Germany, as well as Methodists, Puritans, Catholics, and other sects who sought refuge from religious persecution in the Anglican Middle Colonies, where tithing to the Anglican Church was law, by settling outside of the law's reach. Whether north or south, the settlers in the western areas of the mountains developed a self-reliance dependent only upon family and trusted neighbors, as they established enclaves of their own. This self-reliance led them to becoming self-entertaining, self-educating, and wholly independent of the established government of the colonies. Thus, by the time of the American Revolution in the late 18th century, differing cultures in what would become known as Appalachia were already emerging. There was yet another culture of primary importance to the region. In the South, both free African Americans and those escaping from enslavement settled in enclaves of their own. The predominant Native American tribe of the region, the Cherokee, as well as the white settlers east of the mountains, maintained slaveholding cultures. The mountains offered refuge and sanctuary, and communities of Africans grew in the mountains in what would become the Old South. These communities later contributed significantly to what would eventually become Appalachian culture. The early communities west of the mountains subsisted by farming small plots, hunting, and trapping. For entertainment purposes, they made their own beverages, brewing ale and distilling primitive whiskeys in the south. In the north, beverages tended to be more along the lines of beers, ciders, and fruit wines, though few were from grapes. To entertain themselves further, they celebrated community events with dances and fetes, some church-related and others for less noble purposes. For example, in the north, where there existed a large Germanic influence, Christmas was a time of community celebration with Yule logs, Christmas trees, and feasting. The Scots-Irish influence in the south focused more on celebrations of the harvest and on events marking their home country's long opposition to submission to the British Crown. Regardless of the reason for a celebration, music was an important part of the festivity. The diverse regions of Appalachia developed their own styles of music, and equally important to their contributions to American culture, their own instruments upon which to play it. The Appalachian dulcimer bears many names depending on such things as where it was made or where it was played, but there is little doubt that it emerged in Appalachia in the early 19th century. It is a stringed instrument, usually with 4 strings, which are plucked to create tones. The instrument is played when laying upon the musician's lap or flat upon a table. It is made of wood, is far less complex in shape than the violin, and thus can be constructed with relatively simple tools by a competent woodworker. It is fretted, meaning the playing surface is divided by metal ridges upon which the string being played is pressed by the player. Each fret position produces a different note, rather than a guitar in which the fretted surface, known as the neck, extends from the body to the instrument. The fretted surface of the dulcimer lies within the length of the body. Early dulcimers contained 3 strings, while later versions in Appalachia held 4. One string was used to produce a melody, with remaining strings acting as drones. In this manner, a dulcimer produced a melody supported by a droning rhythm, not unlike the sound produced by bagpipes. Dulcimers became an important component of Appalachian music, yet it has expanded into American and European culture as well. In 1966, the Rolling Stones featured a dulcimer played by Brian Jones on the song Lady Jane. Joni Mitchell has featured a dulcimer in recordings as well as live performances, as has Cyndi Lauper. Bruce Hornsby dedicated his album Rehab Reunion to the mountain dulcimer. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin fame used a dulcimer on Led Zeppelin III. Another instrument which emerged in Appalachia is the banjo. The banjo is an invention of the African American communities in Appalachia, developed out of stringed instruments used in Africa. The earliest banjos were made by attaching a neck to a hollowed-out gourd, with a thin animal skin stretched over the opening. The strings, made of either gut or plant fiber, were stretched along the neck. Early versions are documented as early as 1678 in Martinique, where they were banned by government proclamation, fearful of their being used to incite violence. They are surely much older. In Appalachia, the African Americans created banjos from wooden bodies, installed pegs to adjust the tensions of the strings, and thus changed their tone and added a 5th string. The banjo was played primarily by strumming rather than the finger-picking style through which it is primarily known today, and by the beginning of the 19th century emerged from Appalachia as a favored instrument in minstrel shows. It should probably go without saying that the minstrel shows of the 19th century world would not be acceptable today, as they featured white performers in blackface and stereotypes entertaining to their contemporaries, but today viewed as disparaging. But regardless, they were responsible, largely, for bringing the banjo out of the mountains, so to speak, and into the mainstream as a musical instrument. In the more northern areas of Appalachia, the fiddle emerged as a popular instrument. The fiddle is derived from the European violin, but the Appalachian fiddle is both a separate instrument and a style of playing. Its shape is somewhat different from the violin, having a flatter top. An Appalachian fiddler relies less on vibrato, a technique by which a note's tone is varied by the player, and the instrument was developed to accommodate this alteration in style. All 3 instruments were and remain crucial to the development of bluegrass music, classic American country and western, and other styles, and all 3 have been adapted to other styles of music as well. Compositions for these and other instruments which have emerged from Appalachia are simply too numerous to attempt to list them. Suffice it to say that even the classical violinist Itzhak Perlman has played Turkey in the Straw, an Appalachian ditty, on numerous occasions. The Appalachian region developed as a fiercely independent region, its residents intent upon retaining their cultural identity. From the beginning, it relied upon locally produced foods, including the preservation of seasonal foods for future use, canning of fruits and vegetables, and preservation of meats through smoking or via drying and salting is still a characteristic of the region. Over time, as mining and lumbering became major industries, the preservation of locally produced foods became a matter of economic necessity. The predominance of settlers of Scots-Irish descent and later of Welsh, as more people immigrated from that region to work in the mines, brought with them their love of pies of all types. We're talking meat, fish, vegetable, and fruit pies. These were all part of, and remain part of, favored cuisine. The kettle, known as the Dutch oven, was long a favored vessel for cooking in the region, and Appalachian cookbooks still favor the Dutch oven over traditional wood-burning ovens for many dishes. Although Appalachia was and still is a major coal-producing area of the United States, wood-burning fireplaces and stoves for cooking were favored over the use of coal for heating and cooking. In the Germanic regions, mostly to the north, sausages, cabbage, beets, and turnips were more popular than in the south, where the African influence led to the popularity of collards, turnips, and peanuts. Cornbread, in the form of a cake, was preferred to the north, while spoonbread, a sort of corn pudding, became popular in the south, where molasses was preferred as a sweetener. Side note, who else is getting really hungry right now? Is it just me? In the north, maple sugar was and remains popular. All have become infused in American culture across the country, and some have been adapted in the countries from whence the earliest Appalachian settlers came. In most of America, the once traditional sit-down Sunday dinner with extended family present has become a thing of the past. It remains popular in much of Appalachia, at least in the rural areas. It is often a feature of the Sabbath, and the local minister's presence is a sign of prestige to the table so honored. Appalachian cuisine lacks the complexities of other regional cuisines, substituting local flavors and simple foods for elaborate presentations and complicated recipes. Like all American cuisines, it is an amalgamation of the tastes of the many different cultures which came to America. In some of the larger urban areas within Appalachia, such as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Huntington, West Virginia, establishments boasting of authentic Appalachian cuisine are popular with both locals and tourists. For a region stereotyped as being backward and largely illiterate, Appalachia has produced a fair amount of classic literature. Among the writers from Appalachia, one finds James Agee, whose autobiographical novel A Death in the Family won a Pulitzer Prize in 1958, and was probably the inspiration for Batman: A Death in the Family as well. Although I don't know if that's the case. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Agee was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. Rachel Carson, whose Silent Spring is credited as the impetus for the global environmental movement, hailed from Appalachia, specifically a farm outside of Pittsburgh. She completed her first 10 years of schooling in a small local schoolhouse before eventually moving to Chatham University and eventually the prestigious Johns Hopkins University. There she earned a master's degree in zoology. Perhaps the most famous writer associated with Appalachia was William Faulkner, who was born in Oxford, Mississippi. While some consider Oxford to be outside of Appalachia and others consider it on the fringe of the region, Faulkner set most of his many novels within the region. His body of work earned him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1949, as well as Pulitzer Prizes in both 1955 and 1963. Harper Lee set her To Kill a Mockingbird in Depression-era Alabama, and she grew up in the region, living there for much of her life following the success of that novel. And I'll note that as a fan of cosmic horror and weird fiction, John Horner Jacobs set one of his stories in that region. You can find it in the collection A Lush and Seething Hell. It's a fantastic story and deals with a lot of the music that Larry is talking about in this story, so check it out. These works and many dozens of others contributed to some extent to the perception of Appalachia as a backwards, poorly educated, racist area of the country, stricken throughout the class divisions and backbreaking poverty. In many ways, Appalachian writers helped in the development of the New Deal, attempts to modernize the region in the 1930s, particularly through the efforts of the Tennessee Valley Authority. 3 decades later, the Great Society programs of the Lyndon Johnson administration expanded upon those efforts, and they continue today. Yet it remains a part of Appalachian culture to describe, and almost to celebrate, its status as a region which lags behind the rest of the nation in economic development. Such a label is a facet of the region's culture which remains in place in the 21st century. In the 21st century, storytelling festivals remain popular in Appalachia. During these cultural celebrations, folk tales and legends pertinent to the region are related in the oral storytelling tradition, which is older than the region itself. Early settlers brought with them the oral traditions, folklore, and legends from their home regions, and many of these survive, though the environs of the respective tales have been transferred through time and repetition. Folktales include real and mythical characters from the region's past, including Davy Crockett, who was a real person now largely hidden by mythology. Crockett likely wouldn't have minded that at all, since he was a well-known teller of tall tales in life himself, many of which featured him performing unlikely feats. Others feature characters such as riverboatman Mike Fink, who was likely a composite based on several figures. Another, popular in northern Appalachia, especially Ohio, is Jonathan Chapman, known to posterity as Johnny Appleseed. Chapman was another real person who became a living legend and whose exploits today are largely mythologized. Tales of the so-called Mothman are popular as well. so much so that they have been the basis for the 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies, with Richard Gere. The premise of the film is that the Mothman, a winged humanoid with bright crimson eyes, appeared in November and December of 1967 around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and caused the collapse of the Silver Bridge across the Ohio River on December 15th of that year. The Silver Bridge did in fact collapse, and some people do blame the Mothman, either as a harbinger of doom or as the cause for the disaster. 46 people died as a result, and subsequent investigation blamed the incident on structural failure of a component due to corrosion. What good are engineering facts in the face of a great story? In fact, the legend has grown to incorporate those facts, suggesting that the Mothman is really a harbinger sent here to warn us of great tragedies that are looming in our future or something. The Mothman sightings of 1967 have been presented in several documentaries, magazine articles, blogs, and other media. Such folklore has a long history of Appalachia, dating back to the Cherokee tales which preceded the arrival of the Europeans and which were shared with them over time. Another piece of Appalachian folklore is the tale of the Bell Witch. The first appearance of the Bell Witch occurred, according to legend, around 1817, with an apparition that had a rabbit's head on a dog's body. It has since appeared in countless different forms, hundreds of times, usually as a poltergeist controlled by a witch, usually referred to as Betsy Bell. This piece of folklore was popular enough to be the inspiration for the films The Blair Witch Project and Poltergeist. According to Larry, at least. I'm not sure if it's true about Poltergeist. Appalachia is the home of the legend of John Henry, who appeared as an African-American folk hero. John Henry raced a stream-powered hammering drill, using his own muscle and stamina in a contest against a machine. John Henry won the contest, though he collapsed and died from exhaustion as a result. Celebrated in a famous ballad as well as in hammer songs, which are fast-paced work songs meant to establish a rhythm for a work gang, John Henry appears in various guises in several locations throughout Appalachia. He is likely apocryphal, at best a composition of several railroad laborers from the golden age of the railroads. The early settlers of Appalachia brought with them the enmities of the Old World. Old scores between the Scots clans, the Irish families, their mutual distaste for the English, and other sources of hostility can in many cases be traced to rivalries in the Scottish Highlands and along the border between Scotland and England. The same can be said about the Irish disagreements between Catholics and Protestants. Many of these historic enmities were exacerbated in America when some families chose to support the king during the American Revolution while others became patriots in support of revolt and independence. Interfamily violence was pretty common in the early days of the settlement of Appalachia, but by the time of the Civil War, though there was hearty contempt by some clans for others, outright violence had become fairly rare. That changed with the famous Hatfield-McCoy feud, which ran from 1863 to 1891 and resulted in more than a dozen deaths, and 9 members of the Hatfield family in prison, 7 of them for life. Today, that celebrated feud, which occurred along the Kentucky-West Virginia border, is exploited as a tourist attraction. Museums, dinner theaters, numerous restaurants, and several sites connected with the feud and its participants are used to collect tourist dollars, which are an increasingly important source of income in Appalachia. Feuds, including the Hatfields and the McCoys, are celebrated throughout Appalachia, some real, some imagined. Some are simply creations for the purpose of marketing. Restaurants adopt feud motifs. The image of the stereotypical hillbilly is usually depicted with a rifle shooting at an unseen enemy, though sometimes the enemy in the feud is a federal revenue agent. Along with the rifle, the stereotypical hillbilly wears tattered overalls, a ragged shirt, a battered slouch hat, and is in bare feet. He usually has a liquor jug handy. He is usually white, or shall I say, white. Feuding, or in the vernacular of the region, feudin', along with moonshining, napping beneath a tree, and other less than complimentary images, are routinely exploited by some of the region, focusing on one of the more negative aspects of the region's history and culture. An annual festival held in Pikeville, Kentucky is dedicated to presenting the best of Appalachian culture. It calls itself Hillbilly Days. Thus, some Appalachians wear the badge of hillbilly with pride, while others, the term denigrates Appalachia and its citizens. To these, the term hillbilly is an insult to the citizens of Appalachia, which is highly offensive and is one of the oldest epithets in use in the United States. Thus, while some Appalachians complain of the stereotypical hillbilly, along with other undesirable terms such as redneck, clodhopper, ridge runner, and many more, Others exploit them with pride and anticipation. Just one more thing to feud about, I guess. I hope you learned something today, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to deploy your likes, comment a famous place we haven't covered, subscribe and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about the world's wildest places. I'm Eric Malachite, and we'll see you next time.